WCLN 1170 Radio and Star Communications Channel 16 proudly present the We Should Know Show, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative. Now, here's your host, J.W. Simmons, as we consider closely what we should know.
Welcome back. We Should Know is on the air. My name is J.W. Simmons, your host. We're coming to you on Star Communications TV, Channel 16, simulcast on WCLN Radio. Today's show is very important. I want you to go and call a friend because we're talking about education. We're talking to many people's thoughts. One of the most important things that we should be looking at in government is how we handle our child's understanding and looking at our child's future. And the person that we're talking to is Dr. Jamie King, Superintendent of Sampson County Schools. Dr. King, thank you for taking time and having a conversation with us today.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
You've been on the show before, and we've talked a lot about your background coming from Greensboro. And I was just looking back at some notes, and we were talking off camera about Greensboro being the 47th largest school district in the nation, which is a huge responsibility you had there. You stepped into this world from Greensboro to Sampson County. And my audience and listeners know Sampson County is believed to be one of the largest, or at least the second largest geographical area in the state.
We'll fight with Robeson about it.
Yeah, exactly. You can get in some controversy about it. But, you know, several of the things that I looked at when you came here in 2023 in July, I think is when you started. We're coming up on your 24th month or 2-year anniversary. I want to start the show with just a general question. Since you have been here and you have engaged a lot, we can go down that list in a little while, but you've engaged a lot. What is the significance that you have seen between a district the size of what you came from, with the budget access you came from, to a district that's relatively referred to as a rural school district?
Yeah. That's a great question and a very loaded question. I think one, resources, right? I would start with, I had to learn here that it's not about the resources, it's about the people, right? And so really getting back to the basics, right? Getting back to making sure that educators care about kids, right? Making sure that we're hiring the right people. You know, in Guilford, when there'd be a problem, I'd give another position, right? Or give this resource. Here, it's sitting down with the team and thinking about how can we do this better, right? Not just adding additional resources, adding additional things, but it's really harnessing the power of people, right? Harnessing the effectiveness of educators who truly care about kids. Wrapping that whole child around, when we talk about schools, I talk to our team all the time about it. It's about everybody in the building, right? It's about how does the bus driver interact with students when they get on the bus, right? When whomever's at the front door of that school building, how do they greet kids as they walk in? As teachers are standing at their classroom doors, how do they greet kids and bring them in the classrooms, right? And so it goes to everybody in the building, everybody in the organization. I think one of the things that I'm really excited about that we've done is really get our central office more into schools, right? And so every month I take one of our departments and we go visit a school and we go walk through and do just instructional walks. And so I'll take the finance team one month. I'll take custodians and operations team one month, right? And what's great about it is to hear different people in the organization talk about teaching and learning, talk about what's happening in a classroom with kids, right? And then to walk out in the hallway and for finance, people to say, oh, that's what they talk about when they're buying those curriculum. That's the curriculum. And now we've made connections, right? Now my finance team is understanding when we talk about teaching and learning, what that looks like, what that means. When we talk about resources, right? One-to-one was great, right? My HR team, when we went to visit a school, they were like, one-to-one, we didn't really understand what that was about, right? We didn't understand how that happens in a classroom. Well, now they've been to rooms, we walk out in the hallway and talk about it and have these discussions about how are teachers using technology. Is it the right use, right? Is it too much technology? Is it not enough technology? So just to have those conversations throughout the whole organization is really interesting, and I think makes us better, right, as a teaching and learning, as an educational system. So I just say that's a really new thing, or think that, we've kind of added or brought to Sampson.
One of the things that strikes me too, and I've seen you in several different functions that you've literally, and I'll say this in a very positive way, I've seen you bend a knee and talk to elementary school students, middle school students, engaging student interaction. How important is that for the superintendent to say, hey, I'm going where the students are and trying to understand what they're telling me and what their experience is?
I think it's extremely important. I love when I get out to schools. I love interacting with students. As a superintendent, I'm so far away from that. I'm big picture, I'm future planning, I'm budgeting, those things. Students aren't in my day-to-day interaction, but I got into this because I love kids, right? I love teaching and learning. I love being in a classroom. I love seeing the light bulb moment come on for students. So for me, I have to go visit schools, right? Like I love to go and sit in the cafeteria and eat lunch with kids because they're honest, right? Hey, tell me what you learned today. I haven't learned anything. Oh, okay. Good to know, right? And not that there's anything, right? I mean, some days are like that. All right. I get it. Not every kid is going to get every single thing every day. But then that student knows someone's asking them, right? Someone's listening to them. I went to Union High School a few weeks ago and walked with one of their senior students. And I said, hey, we're building a new Hobbton High School. Yeah. If you could rebuild Union High School, what's the one thing from this building that you'd want to put in your new building? Right. And the student was like, oh my God. And we had a 15-minute conversation, right? About
somebody's really asking me.
Right. And she was like, oh my gosh. But afterwards she was like, that was so much fun. Like I got to talk and I was like, no, it helped me because that afternoon I went to a Hobbton High School construction meeting and I was like, well, just so y'all know, I talked to a student today and here's some things they say, So I think it's important that we listen to students. This is their school district. They're the ones who have to live and breathe and die by what we do with them. And so I think it's important that we listen to them, that we design, an educational system that reacts to them. Now they don't know everything, right? As I told my own kids, I'm your dad for a reason. I'm the superintendent for a reason. I have to make some hard choices sometimes. But I think it's important that then people know the why. Right. And so people, to your point, know that I listen, right? Know that I'm going out there trying to make the best decisions for our district as an organization. And you can't leave students out of that conversation.
It's interesting we're talking about this. I want to kind of segue to another observation here. We've obviously got a new governor, Governor Stein, and one of the things that he's looking at and has been very openly discussing is this idea of something we all depend on, including children, is our mobile devices, our cell phones. And with the committee, I understand he's put together, they're really looking at some ways, how do we deal with that? And to paraphrase, I think the ways he's looking at this thing, how do we get back to the books and not be looking at our phones? And it's become such a big part of us. It's hard to lay it down. I mean, it's quite frankly become a part of our life and existence to have that device. So where do you stand on how we regulate and deal with cell phones in a school building?
Yeah, so I start as a parent, right? So I have 3 children of my own. I wish they didn't have their cell phones at school, right? And yes, as a dad, I could easily say that, no doubt, right? Everybody watching, listening, I could easily be the dad and put the hammer down. But then every other student at that school, right, is bringing their cell phones. And so I think that cell phones add or disrupt the learning that's happening, right? There's lots of research out there that says, right, anytime you look at your phone, it takes you 7 minutes to re-engage in what you were doing previously, right? And so when you think about that on context and scale of a student all day long, how many times is their phone ringing? Or, how many times are they getting a text? How many times are they getting a snap, an Insta, right? I mean, all those things. And so there's never a disconnect. There's never a stop for them. And so, the thing that I worry the most about with cell phones and technology is that it's always on. They can't just walk away from it. When we went home from school, we went home.
That's right.
But with cell phones, you don't get to do that. And I think they just add another layer of distraction to the classroom.
Is there a part of that has a security piece to it? Some parents have said to me that, I want my child to have that phone because, quote, if something happens, I want to, know what's going on in that classroom. And we've seen that in the past, with school shootings and various things that's occurred. Parents are looking at their cell phone and they know their child's okay because they just got a text.
Yep. And I can't argue that, right? As a dad, I'd say a similar thing, right? Like I want to hear from my kids. I want to be able to talk to my kids. But I also know, sitting in the seat that I am, that also can cause chaos, right? That when all the students are texting their families, right? We're not able to get emergency services there, right? We're not able to get everybody because all that communication is going out at once. So it's a log jam in communication, right? We need to make sure that first responders, if we need them, are there, right? If there's an active shooter, that police are on their way, that EMS is on, right? Whatever situation. So it is a struggle. Yeah. And I don't ever discount student safety. I would say that as a school district, we've implemented a panic button system. So all of our teachers and staff members have access to a panic button on their phone, right? They just can pull it up, hit a button. It sends an automatic alert for an active shooter or if they need EMS, anything like that. So all of our staff members have access to panic buttons. All of our buildings are secured and locked with electronic door fobs. Every classroom has a landline phone. Most teachers have a cell phone on them. So I would just tell, parents, remember that we're going to take care of your child. We're going to do what we need to do to make sure that your child is safe. Let us handle that. I understand as a dad myself, again, I want to talk to my kids and I want to know that they're okay, but also got to trust and let the school do their part. And I don't want to be a disruption or a delay to that safety or to those protocols being implemented.
Are you satisfied when you came here and looked at the way the school structure was, the security aspects, the safety aspects? Are you satisfied with that? Or I know you've done some improvements, but do you see more improvements that need to be done?
Yeah, I'd always like to do more, right? I mean, no building's ever as safe as I'd like it to be. But I also don't want our schools to be prisons, right? I don't want our schools to be ones where there's fences around them and you have to buzz in to even get on campus, to drive into campus. That's not our community. And so I think that our schools have to reflect that. We have to be smart when we integrate technology and safety to make sure we're not overshooting too. Because what we don't want to do is kids come in and feel like they're in a prison, right? They should feel like they're at school. It should be joyful. But at the same point in time, they should feel safe and they shouldn't worry about what are kids bringing in their book bags. What are they carrying on them? I talk a lot of time that safety starts in the classroom with the relationship between a teacher and a student, right? And that trusted adult. And so we've done a lot of work in Sampson County about trying to build those relationships with staff members and students. And so we have a program called Trusted Adult, which is making sure that every single student in a building has a trusted adult that they can go to, they can talk to, they can converse with. Because what we see so many times with school shootings and with any of that stuff is that students that are disengaged, students that don't have somebody to talk to, students that don't have a group of friends or an adult that they can trust, that's where this comes from. And so if we can get that on the forefront, safety is very different than if everybody has a trusted adult that they can speak to.
When we come back from this break, I want to talk about some of those trusted adults, some of those teachers and some of the employability tafus or snags that you've run into and what you see as a gateway. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
Welcome to Cork and Brew Roseboro, where you can enjoy your favorite coffee, fraps, smoothies, bakery items, sandwiches, and select beer and wines while reconnecting with friends and family. Sit down and enjoy the experience. Come on by and give us a try.
How can your friend save you money? It's easy. Refer a relative, coworker, neighbor, or friend to Star Communications. Friend signs up for high-speed internet service. Friend's new account is confirmed. Friend gives your name to our service representative as the one who referred them to Star. You receive a $30 internet credit. It's just that simple. And even better, receive a $30 internet credit for every referral that results in a new confirmed account. High-speed internet from Star Communications. Refer a friend today.
At the Reedy Mark, we take pride in a unique, distinguished customer experience. We specialize in handcrafted cocktails, allocated bourbons, as well as gourmet signature food items exclusive to our menu at the Reedy Mark in Roseboro.
Looking for training that leads to a high-demand, high-paying career? Bladen Community College can help you get there. Enroll in our welding program and gain the skills and expertise needed to excel in the industry and secure a successful future. Explore our HVAC program, where you will learn to install and service energy-efficient systems to keep homes and businesses comfortable year-round. Learn more at bladencc.edu or give us a call to get started today.
The average American household has 17 devices connected to the internet. With more and more devices able to get online, you may need to increase your internet speed. Call Star Communications today and let us help you select the package that's right for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know is on there. Again, my name is J.W. Simmons, your host. We're talking education today. Someone that knows education from the inside out is Dr. Jamie King. Dr. King, Superintendent of Sampson County Schools, tremendous background in education and academic credentials yourself. What's the thing that just kind of hits everybody immediately, and you touched on it in the first part of the show, is the adult in the room. And the adult in the room for us is the teachers, is the people that is actually making and molding and helping shape the lives of what our future is. I mean, it's so dynamic. It's hard to even describe how important it is. How are we on attracting the quality person that you want in that classroom? And when I look at the starting salary is now around something like $35,000, it's hard. It's got to be hard. Tell us how you go about that, and are we good with teachers, or are we still depending on substitutes?
Yeah. Whew, that's a loaded question too.
It is a loaded question.
Yeah. I feel like we could talk about this the whole segment, but so staffing wise, yes, it's still a struggle to hire teachers. I think, at the beginning part of April, I think we had 37 teacher vacancies in Sampson County, right? Context. I mean, we have 18 schools, about 8,000 students, roughly 1,000 employees, 900 and something. Teachers, probably 500-600 teachers, and all of that. And so if you think about it, 37 doesn't seem like a lot, but I would say if it's your child and it's their third grade teacher, that means a lot, right? Not having a teacher. And so it's still a struggle. I think one of the things that I'm excited of kind of where we're going in Sampson County is we received the Advanced Teacher Roles grant from the state of North Carolina. And so there's a lot of money in professional development that will roll out. But what I really am excited about is it also provides bonuses to teachers, right? And so it builds a career ladder for teachers to stay in the classroom, right? Every teacher doesn't need to become superintendent. Every teacher doesn't need to go into administration. Great teachers, we need to harness their ability to stay in the classroom. And so we're really excited that next year, 3 of our schools will roll this out. And what's nice about it is it offers up to a $10,000 bonus for teachers. And so teachers could either look at 2 different pathways. You can coach teachers, or you can do what the state calls adult leadership, which means, right, you're kind of that instructional coach. It's called a multi-classroom leader, but essentially it's a teacher that already has good value-added data with students. And then they're going to work with teachers and coach teachers on instructional practices and things like that. Or you can go a different route as a teacher, and you can be a reach teacher, which means you teach more kids, right? And so instead of having a class of 23 students, you have a class of 43 students or 38 students, right? And so there's percentages. The higher percentage of students that you teach, the higher that bonus could be. It's anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. But the nice part about that, all those, is that it's not coming from our local budget. It's coming from the state budget, right? So the state has appropriated funds for the Advanced Teacher Roles grant, and these bonuses that you'll get, or stipends that you'll give teachers who perform these extra duties, either teaching more students or coaching teachers. So I'm really excited about Sampson County Schools received that grant last year. And again, we're in planning stages to implement it next year. The goal is that over the course of 3 years, all of our schools will implement ATR. And so when you look at an economic impact, when you talk about salaries, right, we map that out. And so in Sampson County Schools alone, that could be an increase of $885,000 in salary.
Wow.
That's not local. It's not coming from here. It's coming from Raleigh, right? Yes, it's all of our taxpayer money, right? I mean, so valid. But that's a huge impact to our local economy, right? If we fully, now again, that's a full implementation. That's 3 years from now. But that's a huge economic impact that happens right here, right? All those tax dollars are here.
The second largest employer in the county.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yes. So us and Prestige kind of fight it out for who's number one. But yeah, I mean, to be an employer, to now restructure a career ladder so that as a teacher, you can earn more money and stay in teaching. Right. We talked off air about kind of the pay differential in districts.
Yes, absolutely.
Sampson can't afford to pay people what Wake pays, what Winston pays, what Guilford pays even. But it's also about a balance. Those teachers are getting paid more because they're teaching more kids. I mean, those classrooms are bigger. There's more things that those students are bringing to the buildings with them, right? That teachers have to deal with. And so I also say there's a huge piece of having a balance, right? Having that work-life balance. And I think that's one of the things that I would tell to anybody listening who wants to come to Sampson and work is that, we really try to make sure that our teachers and our educators have a balance in their life, right? That we're not overburdening them. My team will tell me regularly, hey, you got to slow down on that. Everybody's not like you. Some people need a day off, right? I have someone in my office who always tells me, don't forget, people need to eat lunch.
Yeah.
Because I won't eat lunch, right? Because I put my head down and work. And so it's nice to have those people then to remind you, oh, no, pause, right? Pump the brakes, because you can't do everything.
Exactly.
Right? Let's do small things really well and implement it and then move on to the next thing. And so I just think it's important that, when we talk to teachers and educators, that they know that is something that is here. That work-life balance is really important here.
Well, one of the things that strikes me too, as we're having this conversation, and I was going to pull it in later, but I think now is the perfect time, is to talk about the impact that the federal dismantling of education on the federal level, that department, what kind of impact on the grassroots level in rural North Carolina, what kind of impact is that having on you, your administration? What are you going to miss, and what do you have to do to make up that difference?
Yeah, so for us, we have a federal grant right now that's frozen. So for us, it affects multiple employees, right? So we have 2 employees that are paid fully from a federal grant. They'll no longer have a job, right? Because we don't have local funds to pay for that next year. We have 2 employees that are getting their master's in school administration. They won't have the funding for that next year, if these grants stay frozen. We have, I think this year we paid about $31,000 in bonuses to teachers whose students performed really well on EOCs and EOGs. So end of course tests and end of grade tests at the end of the year. We were able to create a local bonus performance with some of that grant funds. And again, local impact, $31,000 went to our teachers. That was all from the federal grant. That's frozen now. Right. So now teachers that we said, oh, we'll provide you a bonus if your students perform. Well, now we're in May, students are about to take a test and we don't have the funds to now next year give those teachers the same bonuses that we gave them this year if their students perform. So all of that's from federal government, right? All of those are in federal funds. And so I think there's just lots of questions about how will that continue as we move forward, right? What does that look like? Education is kind of gone down a path now where a lot of our funding is in grant funding, right? So a lot of the funds that we get, we actually have to apply for to get. School safety grant, right? It's crazy. We have to apply for that every year, right? It's a grant. School safety shouldn't be a grant.
No, it should be an expected part.
School safety is important. It should be a base, right? It shouldn't be something that you have to ask for. And so those are the things that all of us as school districts are now having conversations of. What does that look like in the future? And I think that there's a lot of unknowns of what that looks like. A lot of questions. What we keep hearing is that no one's going to cut, and we'll see. We're guessing that we'll get our federal budget. So school districts kind of have 3 different budgets. You have a local, which is from our county commissioners. You have a state budget and you have a federal budget. We've received our state budget, or at least a planning allocation of state budget, last week. So we're hoping to get federal budget in about 2 weeks from now. And that will be the telltale sign of kind of the dismantling of the Department of Education. And what does that look like when we get those estimate numbers, hopefully in 2 weeks from now.
Well, from what I can understand with the county budget, there's like a lot of counties, to include Wake County, and is that there's this huge effort to try to see where we can cut the county funding. So it's not just geared to one county. So when you look at that from your seat and you feel, well, there's going to be something happening here, how do you adjust looking at next year? We're kind of ending this season as far as school year, but this coming fall when we go back, what does that do to your psyche, and what button do you push, and who do you reach out and say, hey, wait a minute, here's something we cannot
do without? What is that survivable piece that you know you've got to have?
Yeah, it's a lot of working with our Board of Education, working with county commissioners, working with county manager, right? To have conversations about, okay, if this is cut, what does that look like in our budget, right? Yeah. If we're cut, we always kind of do different scenarios, a 10, a 20, a 30% cut. If all those happened, what would be our response to each of those? And so it really starts with the Board of Education kind of setting their priorities. And so that then tells us, once their priorities are set, where to build our budget, right? Because the budget should match the priorities that the board sets. And then from there to go to the county commissioners, kind of listen to them, hear from them what their priorities, kind of listen to them about the budget process and how all that's going to work. And then it's marrying all three of those budgets together, right? Then it's saying, okay, well, state got cut $1 million. Well, federal got cut $500,000. Local is going to get cut $500,000, right? So then you got to add all those together to kind of figure out where you at fully. And I think that's the hard part sometimes, is understanding that those three different budgets, you really can't make decisions until you get all three of those. But every year is different. Last year the state waited until the fall to finally pass their budget. It's hard to make any changes at that point. The school year had started. There's lots of questions about the federal budget that's going to come out. We're hoping that we're going to get it in 2 weeks, but we're not sure. And if we don't get it, then what's the next step? So with budgets, it's always a lot of question marks and waiting, because there's those three different pots that really run our school district.
It sounds like what I'm hearing you say, and you have to be prepared to push a number of buttons depending on what you need to access at the moment, subject to the availability of something behind that button.
That is correct. Yep.
So you have, sometimes the agility part is important, because you may not be able to bring together a school board meeting or something. So you might need to act on that yourself.
Correct. So there's some times where you have to move pretty quick in budgets. Think typically July 1 is when we start, right? Sure. The next school year. Well, we're sitting here in mid-April and we only have one of our three budgets. So, county commissioners meet in a few weeks, right, to, I think, sign their budget. So we'll have some information then in early May, but then a big chunk of is our federal budget, and we're still waiting. That's the hard part, to then make all those changes by July 1 to get implemented for the school year.
I think one of the things that strikes me as we're having this conversation is this idea of expectation. I want to talk about, when we come back from this break, what you see expectations of those people you serve and what you have to meet those expectations. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
At Fisher's, it's not just about fashion. It's about exceptional service. Experience top-notch customer care and find your perfect look. Visit Fisher's today and feel the difference. Looking to refresh your home? At Clinton Appliance and Furniture, we've got everything you need to create the perfect space. We're here to help make your house a home with stylish furniture, appliances, flooring, design services, delivery, and repair. Visit ClintonAppliance.com to explore our selection, or visit us at 401 Northeast Boulevard in Clinton. Shop local. Shop smart. Shop Clinton Appliance and Furniture.
Experiencing slow internet? If you have a fast internet package, the problem is most likely your wireless router. With more devices using Wi-Fi, your wireless router may not be able to deliver the speed and coverage you need. We now have the leading solution to enhance your internet experience. Using small devices in a mesh network, these Wi-Fi appliances cover just about any size home, so that all your devices can operate to their fullest potential. Whole home Wi-Fi from Star Communications. Get the most out of your internet connection.
If you run a business, you need sales. To get sales, you need customers. To get customers, you need exposure. Let our team of experts craft and produce the perfect video ad to reach your intended audience while making the most of your advertising dollars. Call 1-800-706-6538 or visit starcom.net to contact our Star Communications production team and get your business moving to the next level.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We Should Know What's On There. J.W. Simmons, your host. We're talking education, public school education, with the superintendent of Sampson County Schools, Dr. Jamie King. Dr. King, again, I want to get back to some of the pieces, and there's so many moving parts in public education today, and we've talked just a bit about the budgetary process. But when I reflect back and I look at some of the things that I know you and your staff look at, we're looking at 120 buses in Sampson County. Now, a lot of people think, well, that's pretty interesting, but those buses have to traverse the largest county, 72 miles from one end of the county to the other.
Square miles.
All of that's critically important. And then I look at the whole daily route, the funding of those bus drivers, the safety, the training issues, over 4,200 kids riding those buses. And this is on a daily basis, and this is twice a day. Mm-hmm. So as you said off camera, as we were talking a while ago, everything comes to cumulative numbers. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of numbers.
It is. I talk a lot of times in Sampson County about, Sampson County is roughly 987 square miles. Mm-hmm. The state of Rhode Island is 1,023 square miles. So Sampson County is barely smaller than the state of Rhode Island. And so when we talk about transporting kids to school, that's a state. I mean, we are transporting kids across a state if you think Absolutely. About it, right? And so it is massive in size. It is massive in scale. When we try to talk about bus routes and changing them, right, that is a budgetary item, mm-hmm. right? Because of the cost that it takes to run our transportation system. The state has an efficiency rate. So we get, actually the more efficient your routes are, the more money you get from the state for your transportation department. And so, we're really excited. Our transportation department this year increased their score, right? Which means they were more efficient. And so it's always trying to improve. But transportation is difficult in such a large geographic district.
I think the dynamic for that for me is understanding that piece of it, which causes me to want to segue into the next observation here. When we look at the diverse population, typically I think people don't really give it a second thought, but you also deal with it's not just Hispanic, but a multicultural aspect of students in that classroom. And I was just blown away just looking at some of those different diverse speaking the language, mm-hmm. Over 10, 19, whatever different languages exist in a rural county school system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I always say schools are a microcosm of our communities.
Yeah.
Right. So if you walk in our schools, they're going to look just like our communities look. And so it's balancing that. All right. It's understanding that Sampson has gone through a massive demographic change in the past 10 years. Right. And so part of education is also then making sure that our teachers, our staffs, our schools are designed to meet the community needs, because the community needs now are very different than what they were pre-COVID, mm-hmm. right? Or 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. This morning we were on a panel talking about kind of the difference when we were kids and kids in school now, mm-hmm. right? And how school has to do so much more mm-hmm. than what it did when we went to school. When we went to school, it was truly about education, right? It was the books, right? The ABCs, right? Your numbers. It was learning those things. And now there's so much more to education, right? It's mental health. It's making sure that kids have career options afterwards. It's all the next steps. And those are great things, and we want to do those, but it's a different environment. It's a different school now than it was when we all went to school. And so it's making sure that then we're designing that for kids and for what they need, for teachers, so that they can make sure they're reaching those students. Just making sure we're kind of meeting all those different needs.
And one of the things that you just touched on that I've got noted here that I wanted to talk about is the mental health picture. I was talking with some behavioral health folks yesterday, and it struck me in the conversation that one of the biggest pieces and one of the largest volumes of folks we have together in our counties, both local and city school districts, is that number of people within the education environment. Does it concern you that we may not have the adequate counseling capability, the expertise, the training of somebody to deal with specialty counseling problems? I want to kind of pose that question first, and I got a follow-up to it.
Great question. So Sampson County Schools, we're really lucky. We house Project Activate in Sampson County Schools, which actually has 2 fully licensed clinical mental health clinicians, right? So our students, our staff have access to 2 licensed therapists, right? That they can have at any point in time. We have a process, of course, that goes through school counselors to register them, right? Talk to parents, get parent permission. But beyond that, right, we also have a program with Trillium where any of our students can get virtual mental health counseling, right? So again, going to school counselors can get them signed up. I was talking to school counselors, I don't know, maybe about a month ago about this, and they were really excited to kind of roll it out to make sure that students have access to that. You know, I think that there's a lot of that stereotypes that we have to help students with, right? That it's okay to say I'm not okay, right? It's okay to have a bad day. I think that, you know, students now, we haven't adequately taught them how to deal with those emotions, right? How to deal with things. And so I think that's when that mental health comes in, that some of these students don't have the coping skills, right? Don't have the repertoire in there, right, past of how to handle that, right? How to deal with that. And so we as educators have to help them, right? And sometimes it's a missing assignment, right? That's going to send a student over the edge that day. It's not about the missing assignment, right? There's something else. There's some other trauma. There's something else that's happened. And so really getting with our staff to make sure that they understand mental health, right? Mental health first aid training, right? That's a new thing that's kind of come out in the last 10 years. That's true first aid, almost like CPR first aid, right? But it's for mental health. So it's how to help a student when they're in crisis in that moment until someone can get there, right? To really help them. And so rolling that out to staff, making sure that staff have those skills and knowledge to help students when they need it.
One of the things that has happened recently here as we're having this conversation, the school in Texas that just recently had a shooting situation occur. Injuries occurred, kid in the school firing a gun, and it came down to the structural component of how that child got that weapon in school. And supposedly one of the answers was that one of the other children opened the door so he could come in a side door. When you see things like that as a superintendent, I'm sure you have a whole different picture in your face about this. How do we look at it not only from a structural point of view, but just take that away and say, why did that child react in that way to feel that it was necessary? And not dealing with the structural integrity, but dealing with the mental picture. What do we do to isolate what created that problem for him and feel, without being biased, call it out? If it's a family issue, if he's not getting the right medication, help us understand that.
Yeah. So I think it goes back to kind of the talk we had earlier about safety, right? It's about having a trusted adult that student can talk to, or that student's friend can talk to, right? So what we know from most school shooters is that they have told someone, right? They've told a friend beforehand. They've told a sibling. They've told someone before they're going to do it. They've posted something online, right? And so what we have to ensure is that our students feel safe enough to come and talk to someone, to say, hey, I saw Colt posted something. I'm a little worried about Colt today.
Yeah.
You know, could you talk to Colt? Could we talk to Colt together? You know, or to have an adult that has a relationship with Colt that Colt can go to and say, you know, I'm really having some thoughts. Like, I'm not happy right now. This is what I'm thinking. That can then say, oh, Colt, you need some help, right? Like, we need to get you some mental health therapy so that you can get through this. You can work through these thoughts, right? And what's going on. And I think one of the things that we've asked teachers to do all that, right? So we've asked teachers to go teach your class and be the mental health therapist and be the parent, right? And grade papers and plan your lessons and do all these other things. And so I think as we look forward, we've got to figure out ways to make sure that our teachers are focusing on teaching, but then that there's these resources in the community, there's these resources in the school that we can reach out to say, hey, I have Thomas today. Thomas is not having a good day. He needs some help today. Right? Can someone come to a session with Thomas? Right? And I think that's where we're missing the kind of the community sense of it can't just be the school. Right? We have to have others help us with some of these issues because it's not just a school issue, it's a community issue. And so making sure that we're opening the doors to those community members to come in to help us make sure we're serving kids the way they need to be served.
With such a diverse population we have in the Sampson County school system, the size of the school system, the huge number of students, again, 8,800 plus, is it reasonable to make the assumption that we can handle this, or are we somehow
behind the curve, and somebody needs to take a close look at it and say, we needed this more specialty connectivity, because for one culture, this may be something that's the norm, but yet another culture may say, well, that's not, that's dangerous. That's not right. So, and we have all these opinions that's now colliding. And I think that creates an interesting environment, and it just kind of gets your thoughts on that. And if we need to carry it over to the next segment, we can.
So again, I think, our schools are microcosms of our communities, right? And so I think where we see a disconnect, though, is when our staff doesn't always match our students, right? And so we have that in Sampson County, right? We don't have a lot of Hispanic teachers, but we have a ton of Hispanic students, right? And so then going to the community, right? Anybody listening, right? Like, we are trying to hire Hispanic teachers, right? Because we want that relationship with students, right? To be something that they can see someone who looks like them in a classroom. They can see someone who looks like them in our educational system.
And can speak their language.
Yes. We're trying to work with some different technology programs to really help to make sure that any student who doesn't speak English, right, understands what their teacher's saying, right? So we're looking at some different translation software and programs, right? Because no student should go to school and not understand what the teacher's saying all day. But yet we know that's happening in our community. So how can we fix that? How can we give teachers the right tools and the right resources to make sure every kid can engage in their lesson?
And that's happening in large systems as well, and Wake counties and the Guilford counties and in the state. Those same kinds of things they're wrestling with, but their resource bag is a bit fuller.
Correct. And I think that's where we struggle here, is those resources, right? So that's when we kind of call a huddle, right? And okay, here's the current issue we're facing. Who's got some ideas? Who's got thoughts? And then let's try to research and learn before we just jump into it. So I'd say there's a lot of kind of pause here when we get to those problems to really make sure we're doing it the right way.
One of the things when we come back from this break, I want to kind of touch on is some of the key topic issues that has been put out there by the North Carolina School Forum, and just let you touch on those very quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
Providing fewer commutes, more backyard offices, and crystal clear meetings. Providing less, you froze up. And more presence in your presentations. Providing a better internet experience. Providing possible.
We find in life that some things just go together. Like peanut butter and jelly, cheese and crackers, steak and potatoes, and of course, milk and cookies. But the bottle and the throttle are never a good combination. Be smart. Be safe. Be responsible. Don't drink and drive.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're coming up on the last part of the show today. We're talking with Dr. Jamie King, Superintendent of Sampson County Schools. We're talking about all things education in a rural school system. Of course, Dr. King comes from the 47th largest school district in the state or the country, the second in the state, I think. Here's the thing that we're talking about, folks, so you understand. We're talking about a subject that should be, and I think everybody out there recognizes that it's an important thing to us, is our children, developing children's lives, creating understanding, making sure they have the mental capacity, physical capacity to move forward in what is becoming a more diverse society. Dr. King, again, thank you for being with us. I just wanted to touch on, let folks know where we were. Sometimes people will call in and say, I missed the first two parts of the show and didn't know who you were. So I think I've taken care of that. The North Carolina Public School Forum has 4 particular issues. They call them the top education issues. They represent Public School Forum policy agenda for 25-26. And one of those, that first thing that they talk about is school funding. And they talk about the equitable, adequate, and flexible to meet student unique needs. And I thought the way that was worded, it's basically saying, here is a bag of money and you take it and make sure there's enough mayonnaise on the bread, or there's enough food here, or there's no food, or there's psychological needs. What do you read from that when you listen to that first key issue.
Yeah, so I think it's really about giving districts the budget flexibility to meet their needs. You kind of talked about my background. I think it's really interesting that when you look at the state of North Carolina, we're the second largest state for rural school districts in the country, right? Only behind Texas. No one would think that when they think of North Carolina. No one thinks of, these rural school districts, but that's what we are. And I think, too many times legislators in Raleigh build budgets and build things around those big school districts. And then our rural school districts, which make up the majority of the state, are left with budgets that don't really meet their needs. And I'll say that's something that I've learned coming to Sampson. And so I think what the Public School Forum is really advocating is that we should have local flexibility to maneuver our budget as what we need, right? And so if mental health is something that's a huge issue here, that we could use some classroom teachers, or we could use central office staff money, for mental health clinicians, rather than not have them, or have to use that out of local budget. And so just this budget flexibility, especially with charter and private schools now getting state funds, school districts would like some of that same flexibility to be able to move money in and out of different, we call them program codes or PRC codes, to move money in and out so that we can adequately design our district for what we need in this community.
One of the things, and we're speaking of budgets right quick here, because this next observation is geared with budgets, because it talks about competitive pay in North Carolina for teachers. The reality is that if you look at competitive pay, I'm sure teachers in Wake and Guilford get paid on a higher scale than folks in rural areas. Is that realistic that will ever become in any way a parity or at least equal that? And if it doesn't, what does that say for your challenge to get teachers to move here? What's the incentive?
Yeah. I mean, it's a challenge now, right? So Clinton City has a tax and their teachers are paid more than Sampson County Schools teachers are paid, right? So even locally, we have that same issue, right? I'd also say it's about, though, the school district, right? And it's about getting teachers to understand the vision and where we want to go, right? I would say in Sampson, I think we're really moving forward in trying to make our teachers the forefront of our decisions, right? And so I talked earlier about advanced teacher roles, right? And rewarding, to the tune of almost $1 million of extra funds just in Sampson County Schools for teachers. Now, yes, that comes with additional work, no doubt. It's not free money, right? I mean, we're going to pay you, but you're going to get additional responsibilities. But I think about a family of 4, right? What that does in the difference in the income, right? What that does for that family and what they can provide for their children, right? What they can provide for their family. And I just think that makes a huge difference when we're talking about especially rural school districts, right? That we're really trying to keep people here. We're trying to design some internship opportunities so that our students can, as they're in high school, can actually learn about the jobs that we have in Sampson County Schools. We were talking to Sampson Community College the other day about the students that need internships and apprenticeships next year. And they had someone in electrical and they were going to send them to Raleigh. And I said, stop. We have an electrical shop, right? We have a shop in, Sampson County Schools. Why can't they intern in our electrical shop and learn right here? Why do they have to go to Raleigh? Right. We're doing the same work. And it's just one of those of, we never thought about that, right? Now we currently employ students in the summer on our tech team, right? So help pull all our laptops in, clean them, refresh them, do all those things, right? We're employing some of our own students to do those. So we're looking at how can we expand that? How can we offer our, foods classes? We have a foods class at Midway High School. How can we offer those students internships and apprenticeships in our school cafeterias, right? And then they could actually earn money and have a job while they're still in high school, and possibly see this as a career opportunity. So it's also trying to grow your own. But when I say grow your own, it's not just teachers, right? It's looking at the whole organization. Because if we can't get kids to school, if we don't have enough bus drivers, we can't teach them, right? If we're not teaching them, lunch doesn't matter that much, right? And so it's got to be a whole organization. So really trying to look at how do we keep people in Sampson County here? How do we employ them in Sampson County schools? And so I think those are some of the things we're working on.
One of the things I want to use, if most likely take the rest of the show to do this, and I held it off to the last, but it's a piece. If I don't ask this question, I'm going to receive a lot of comments. Is tell us where we are with school district and Hobbton School District and the school, and is I guess as directed as you can, where folks can understand this is, and you talked about this last time we had you on, is this not something you just snap your fingers. There's a lot of assessment. Have we lost that? I've had people mention to me, well, I guess we're not going to get that because of this federal funding or because the county don't have money. We had that locked in. Is that still doable and durable?
Yes. So we're still locked in. We're still there. We're still looking for additional funding, right? I think we've been very open and honest about that. Would love anybody who's watching or listening. You want to write a $4 million check? Sampson County Schools will gladly take it, and we can be done with fundraising and budgeting.
Absolutely.
For that. So that's what we're looking at, right? We still need about $4 million for complete everything that we want. So your question though, about 3 minutes ago, a meeting started to look at the new plans. Right. So we had an initial plan. We met with some community members, met with staff out at the school, had them tell us likes, dislikes, things like that. So the engineer went back, listened to all that feedback, and is presenting a new design as we're sitting here currently speaking. And so I'll get to see that as soon as we're done. I'll go look at that. And then from there, we'll roll out kind of next steps. We're currently in the bidding process for what we call I'm going to get really nerdy, but a construction manager at risk. And so that's a current bid that's posted on our website. So again, anybody listening or watching, if you want to be a CM at risk, that bid is currently posted on our website and closes in about 2 weeks. So, there's constant work. There'll be some site work out at the land just to kind of survey, look at it. Again, in full transparency, we do not have the land yet. We're still talking with the landowner. And so then there's background contingencies, right? Like, so if we don't have that land, what's the next step, right? So all that stuff's in work. But the funding, right? I've heard the same thing, that the $62 million from the state grant we weren't going to get. We are still getting it. It is state funded. There's no federal dollars that go to that. So
and there's not a timetable on it that it goes away if you don't lock it.
So there is a timetable, but we are well within our timetable.
Okay. So we're
the
good
state
on
has,
that.
yes. And the state has a timetable, and the state has extensions that you can apply for once you get past that timetable. So none of us are at that level of worried. It takes a while to do the initial work before you ever dig a hole.
One of the things you said in just your commentary struck me is that, I was thinking, wow, I don't know anybody that's going to write a check for $4 million. But that's a point that's probably something that some folks may say, well, I can't do that, but I can do, I don't know, 50,000 or 100. Yeah. The reality is what you're saying to us is that $4 million is not there that the county can write a check for.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, so we've talked to the county, right? So, I mean, they are open for us to continue some.
But was it there at one time?
Yeah, so the county is putting $4.2 million. That's their match, right? So they're giving us.
But so that's there.
That is there. Yep.
Okay.
So all of that, it's still, right, if you do the whole school, everything you want, right? So I talk about you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything that you want. Right. If you want everything that we want in the school, we need another $4 million with all the funding that we currently have. Right. So we need another 4. So we've had some conversations with county commissioners, right? Looking out forward, looking at our own budget. What can we kind of cut to put in the budget? And then, are there other grants out there that we can apply for? So that's kind of where we're at with the funding.
Well, I want to, thank you for taking on that project. Everyone I talk to in that area says it's something that is drastically and dramatically needed. So moving that forward in any way we can help you push that message out, and kind of a to-do list of folks that, want to not talk about it, but be about it. We need more of those people to step up, is what I hear you saying.
We do. I mean, it's a community, right? It's a community school. Schools should be a hub of the community. And so, right, that's why we put it out there. We've not been shy about that. We're short, $4 million. And again, that's the complete school. So that's all the athletic fields. Right. That's everything that we would need to kind of turnkey open the building. Right. I'm not worried yet. I think we'll get there. Right. But there's a lot of work to make sure we can get there. And there's a lot of bids that still have to go out. So, that price tag could change drastically. Tariffs are now, we now have to worry about that. And what is that going to do to the cost of the building? We're still working.
Everything matters. We've got about 30 seconds. I'm going to let you have some of the last commentary on that 30 seconds.
Yeah, just a thank you to all of our staff, all of our students. They're the reason we do this every day. They're the reason we come here. We have graduation season coming up. So I'm so excited to see our students walk across that stage, get those diplomas, but I'm also excited to see what they're going to do next. right? And so I tell all of our students, this isn't the end, it's just what's next.
Absolutely. I would again want to thank you for taking time coming in and talk to us. You've always been great about doing that. We appreciate what you're doing and taking a leadership role here in the county. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again each and every week right here on We Should Know. Also, I want to say, as I always do, may God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.